I'm so sorry. So we're gonna try it again. A couple of people have been following me through this process and know that this is kind of unfortunately, a regular occurrence. I'm not really sure 100% what causes it. But we'll figure it out at some point, whether it's a hardware thing or it's something at the ISP level, or I'm not sure. But it seems to be pretty common, and it's part of the process here. So now, ultimately what we're trying to do here, hey, I know it keeps happening. It's one of these like frustrating. This is all really the idea of getting the information out and doing it during a live stream seems to be a pretty conducive process as far as channeling and as far as communication, as far as like engagement, and I love it. But we bump into these issues. But the goal is to take all this information and to put it out in a much more refined form as separate videos that are produced and that type of thing. So this is more like the dry run. Could be the router. Could be. I mean, I've looked into it. I know I might need an upgrade, but I mean, at least what I'm doing now, it should be more than enough for what I'm asking it to do with respect to bandwidth and with respect to the number of connections and these types. So, who knows? There's only so many times you can, clear the cache and reset it and take out batteries and do all this stuff. It's just, but that said, we shall march on. But so, the story is visible everywhere, right? And, if we consider that every two has a third as an idea, and you look at Adam and Eve, obviously there is that third, and that third is Lilith. That's really the gist here. And looking at how she's manifested in these different ways is really interesting, and one of the most significant with respect to my work in connecting the tarot through this algorithm to the one truth, right? Excuse me, pardon. And there's this idea of this lower world, right? This idea of this other tree that we've talked about, and I've mentioned it. I've kind of touched on it before with respect to the wheel, right? How the fact that this wheel there's a counter rotation that takes place in the march. The march is one of those things that is part of this process that I've mentioned many times in the system. The vortex, right? That vortex being that counter rotating force, and that counter rotating force with the the fixed idea of the suits and the rotating idea of the wheel of time, and how those coincide are that same concept, but taken to a much different level when you consider the fact that there's actually this upper lower counter rotation happening. And so we always have this idea in our minds of this counter rotating force, fine, but we think of that as our higher and lower world. What we don't consider is that there is that third. When you approach the situation with the algorithm, it becomes clear. The lower world that we live in right now is actually composed of two worlds. The world of the light and the world of the darkness. And when we do the work of, say, the hermit, that darkness occurs down here first, in the real world. Your soul is always talking. So what does that mean? And when we consider that, and we consider where that voice is coming from, this whole new side matters. Suddenly, we're not just looking at the original story, which some people have had some experience with me, kind of going through their story. But then we have this idea of the next phase, the third part of the working, basically, like this idea of why are they barren? What's the purpose of the rejection? What's the, and so forth. And so now what this is Lilith. This is Adam. This is Lilith. And if you consider what we're talking about here, it's a totally different circumstance, right? Like, think about what's happening here. And when we really look at the full picture, it sort of starts to become more clear. When we look at the tarot as simply the 4 suits marching through the journey of the Fool, we're not recognizing the full breadth of the story and why this flip happens due to that vortex during the descent and the ascent. Why these don't switch. Why these don't switch, but these do. Right? And these dynamics here are important. But what's more important is to understand what it's saying. That's the inner workings of the clock. Let's be frank, most people just want to know the time. What time is it? And so rather than looking at how the clock works, we can look at what time it is. And so that's why and how the tarot works. That's why and how interrogating our universe with the right tools actually gives us truth instead of answers. Okay. So that said, let's go ahead and I think it's time that we jump into playtime. So when we're in the outer order, something interesting happens. I've mentioned before, there's the outer order, the inner order, and then the inner sanctum. The outer order is the lies told openly, right? And so what do we do here? We play with our toys. We have permission to insult deity, right? It's like the idea of taking all this information that we bump into and you hear here or elsewhere in your studies. We take that information and we play with it. We see how it fits together, see how it doesn't fit together. We apply it to some of our religious work, of our meditative work. Oh, there he is again. Hi there. Gematria is a really fun way to do that. I love doing Gematria on this channel. We have some really cool people that they add a really, really nice perspective in their energy, and the Gematria always comes out great. So let's just put this away for now. Okay, we'll continue with that later. So, okay, well, there's some truth to that, and we can actually, one day I'll discuss that, because what we're talking about here, just for right now, let me plant the seed in the meantime, Emma. The idea here is that we're talking about the fact that, at the end of the day, the one truth that we're trying to reach is that we are not the observer, we're the thing being observed. The voice of your soul is my voice right now, and later on it'll be something else. The voice of your soul is speaking to you at all times in the language of color and light in your eyes and sound in your ears, and the idea of vibration and the exchange of energy and touch. That's your voice, right? And so that's the one truth. And so what we're talking about here is the idea of the upper and the lower world and communication between those two things, which is really just your higher and your lower self, bypassing that pesky ego in the middle that convinces us that it's the one talking, and it prevents us from being heard by ourselves. Okay? And when we come to that truth, that ego disappears, the conversation happens, and we realize that we're the ones speaking and listening at the same time. Forget the words I'm speaking right now, just feel them, but you get the idea. And that occurs on this one infinite world, this one infinite moment of time that is our thought. And that thought was born at the beginning of time and exists at the end, and everything in between that we're living and walking through right now is just our story that we're telling. But it's really just our dream. It's a tiny little piece of that intelligence that's called you. It's the only infinite thing. It's the only thing that's real. So now you're asking about this idea of going into other realms. Well, there's a truth to that, because the reality is that for every you, there is a reflection, and that reflection is holographically split up into every possibility of that you at all times simultaneously. And so right now, We're going through this experience elsewhere, in infinite versions. What is the purpose of manifestation but to experience? And what is the greatest experience but all at the same moment? The reason that we don't know that is because we're just one piece of that, so we're stuck in our little universe. And that's on purpose. And you're in yours, and you're in yours, and you over there, you're in your own. And we interact, but there's a shield in between. So we can't actually jump into each other's universes, but we can know them. You can't see it, but you can know it. And so what you're saying is true, because ultimately the you that's in that other universe can communicate with the one that's here very easily, in fact, just recognizing that there is no distance and you can speak through the veil. If you want to learn how to do that, we talk about that here on the channel. At least we talk about it in the inner order. The how. Right now we're talking about the what. Later on we talk about the how. And then we finish with why. So I hope that kind of shed some light, Emma. That's really what we're discussing here, right? That's the ultimate goal. I had a couple of cards out when this first started, right? I had Lust, I had the Empress, and I had the High Priestess. Right? And now if you look at the majors with respect to these two individuals, the 2 and the 3, they're these sort of two sides of the divine feminine energy, right? There's the intuitive one, the spiritual one, the kind of inner you. And then here we have this, the nurturer, the one that brings forth things into the world. The Empress is this kind of idea of the mother. She's not always pregnant, but she's always in a state of wanting to bring things manifest. And then we have this on the bottom here. This is the strength card in the Thoth Tarot. It's called Lust, not Strength. And what it refers to, if you look at the image, let me grab the large. Okay. So the image here, what we're looking at is the 7-headed beast of the lower world. Right? I know I talked about that before. I mean, the idea of the tree having this dark reflection, the Citra Aqua. Let me jump to the image here. Okay, this lower tree is kind of a fallacy. The lower tree only refers to the 7 realms, those 7 husks, emanations, the opposite of the Sephiroth, right? And what is that? The opposite of the Sephiroth is where we get this word of the Qliphoth, the Qliphoth. There's multiple ways to pronounce it, but ultimately it's the Qliphoth, or the Qliphoth is an excellent pronunciation. And one of the reasons is this idea of a Kli, and we're going to speak about that at some point, what the Kli actually is. Okay, but the Qliphoth is the negative vessel, the damaged vessel, the broken cup. The idea of the feminine energy, we've always been told, and we quite intuitively understand, don't we, that the cup is a feminine concept. When you consider the downward pouring cup into our world and being caught by another cup, is where we wind up having this tension, because unfortunately the purity of what's being poured from above gets shifted on the way down, doesn't it? And then it appears as something bad down here, and so that exchange doesn't work. You can only take the cup being poured into the mind first. You have to have the mind into the heart. Okay, the two cups don't work. That doesn't gel. But now, so there's this idea, though, of the story that we've been told. And so if you consider the reflection of Malkut, the place that we live, the only actual manifest world, the 10s, all the 10s of the tarot, they're what's real. What this place is that we're talking about is not a whole tree. It's one Sephiroth that is the opposite of a Sephiroth, that exists in the same place. So if you consider the tree from that respect, that bottom 10 is actually two things at the same time. It is Malkuth and it is Qliphoth. And that is Adam and Lilith. And so that's what we're talking about, okay? Eve was the distraction. Eve is the princess. Eve is the object of desire. Adam doesn't get it. It's not his fault. And so when you consider that, understand the importance of Lilith and who she really is. She's not a negative source from the perspective of pleasure or pain or mercy or severity from our surface understanding of those words. She's the true object of our desire, because what that is to allow the flow. She's in a constant state of wanting to bestow but being rejected, and is in therefore a state of lament. Whereas we are in a constant state of the desire to receive. And so that's a beautiful thing waiting to happen. How do we help it happen? Well, that's a great question. That's the only one that matters, isn't it? Because ultimately we know that we're two sides of this at the same time, right? We're our nurturing side and we're our intuitive side and we're all these things at the same time. But then there's always that third. And the third is ultimately the truth. These two are not opposites. They're two sides of the same coin. And when you consider these two as opposites, you realize the one truth, right? And so what Lilith is the thing blocking us. Okay? The term that the Hebrews used was a husk, and it's different than the other idea of the Sephiroth. And what is a Sephiroth? A sphere. The Sephiroth are the point of emanation, but more important than that, I've heard it used as the radiance, like the thing that's radiating. I've heard it referred to as the sapphire, which is kind of where that term comes from, the gem, you know. But the idea here is that they are all encapsulated ultimately holographically in the 10. The 10 is really just the physical illusion of the actual reality, right? And now what that ultimately is a state of constantly speaking. Your soul is always talking at every moment from every way it possibly can to be heard. It's speaking to your eyes, your ears, your nose. It's everywhere. It's constant. It's everything. It's you. It's unbridled bestowal. And there's an opposite, and that's Lilith. And what is she? She is the husk, the shell, the want to bestow, but it's being stopped by that shell. It can't get out. And that blockage is the work we're actually here to get rid of. That blockage is the ego. That blockage is the abyss. The creature of the abyss, the Koronzon, right? That's our true enemy. And what that allows is for the union, the reunion, the recollection, the restoration, the remembering. No longer is she rejected. Her desire to bestow is finally realized that she never wanted to bestow. She wanted to receive, because that's why she was created. And what is she going to receive? Herself. You. So how do we do that? Right? Is that what we're here for? Are we here for the how? Or are we here for the what? Or the why? Love that card. That's Crowley's, or Frida Harris. This is Frida Harris's Ace of Cups. Let's say we get the Ace of Sword and just play a little bit, right? This is playtime. Let's stay in playtime for a minute. Let's just see if we can find an Ace of Sword real quick and apply that to something here visually, and let us see what we can see. There's the Malkut. Notice that it's a little bigger than the others, as if everything like on top just sort of collects into it and it kind of grows because of that. There's the wand. Let's grab that sword. Let's see what Crowley was trying to say. Isn't that lovely? The loops. This is what we're told is the order. And you must respect the divine order or it doesn't work. We know that. That is true. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 works. If I do 1, 2, 4, 3, 5 and we try to exchange money, that's going to be a problem for one of us. Order matters. And so that's why we respect the divine order, right? But now we know, due to the fact of the fall, that when this occurs in the higher world, these get swapped and they get turned around. Upside down. They change position and they change direction. These don't, because they're pinned by the tree. Right? If we look at the tree of life, there's two pillars on either side, but there's no pillar in the center that's obviously visible, right? But that said, though, those two pillars prevent those two from swapping. Okay. And so you see what we're talking about here. And so now these two are upside down in the higher world. In the lower world, that's what we see. And so what we wind up getting, if I only had a second tarot deck, let's use the black and white one. That's why the black and white one's part of the kit, is so that you can see the difference between that and the color deck. The Qliphoth as the color and the Hermetic Tarot as the black and white works very well together when doing this work. The divine order. Of the lower world. Okay, let's find an Ace Pentacle. Where's that Ten of Pentacle? It's a pretty one. Notice it's very different than the Ten of Pentacle in the color world, right? It's quite different. Now up on the upper world, due to the fact that during the fall it appears to have flipped. It didn't flip, it just looks like it did. What we have here is the divine mind installing into the profane heart. And that's how we hear, that's how we know our higher self. Because we're not listening with our ears any longer, we're listening with our heart. And that's the only way to experience her. You can know her. In the same way, when you are speaking, the universe is in a state of listening always. How do I know? Resonance. Hum an A, and the A string on a piano will vibrate. Because it's listening. Depending upon the quality of your speakers and otherwise, if I were to play an A note here, or hum an A, or an F, or a G, whatever, the string on your guitar would vibrate at that note, but the other strings wouldn't. The F one would vibrate the F. That's it. And then why? Because it's listening. Then, when it hears, it speaks back. And when I'm in a state of listening, the universe is speaking. And I just want to change the phrasing of that. When you are in a state of listening, the only thing you can hear is the sound of your own voice speaking back. Now we can also change that a little bit again. When you are in a state of listening, the only thing you can see is what you look like from the perspective of the world. See yourself through the eyes of the world. The world is always watching. And so what does that mean? That means that you can view yourself from the perspective of yourself, the higher, which is what you are. You are the thing being watched. And so what are entities? Well, they're just little pieces of ourselves that we put attention to. We draw attention to something, and when we do that, we give it form. Prior to that, it's just being. The moment we give it attention, it becomes a being. It becomes from the verb being to a noun. Prior to that, it's just the verb. It's just being. Being what? Being itself. Just a flower being a flower. I come along, it becomes beautiful. Now it's a being beautiful. But it is also the being of beauty. It becomes a thing, right? And so we can know her. The way to know her is to be her. Be her as the verb. Be that desire to bestow. And then see yourself through the eyes of the world, and you will become, because you're now witnessed. You're now observed. And what are you observed by? Yourself, the world. And when that happens, you become the thing. You become it. And you go from the verb of just being her to physically being her in your conversation. So let's do it. Who wants to do that? I'm going to grab this card here. I'm going to put it out. And what I want you to do is just remember what I just said. And just kind of consider it from the emotional perspective. Listen with your heart right now at what we're talking about. What she is you. This is Lilith. What she is you. And right now she's just being Lilith. And I want you to be her. Be the verb. Feel the desire in your heart to want, to give. Not to receive, but to give. It's the idea of seeing the object of your desire and going, I can't wait to kiss them. Think about the idea of a kiss. What is a kiss? It's proactive. You're not in a state of receiving, it's a giving. Think about the feeling of squeezing somebody during a hug. She's in a state of wanting to bestow. Feel that want in your heart. Feel Lilith. Be her. And then realize the truth and see yourself through the eyes of the world. See that emotion from the other side. Feel it in your heart. And now look at what that feeling looks like from your mind. at the same time. Let the feeling stay. Keep it there. It's okay. That sensation feels good, doesn't it? Aren't you like, you know, you like want to move, and you want to like share it. You want to like touch somebody so that they can feel that spark. That's her. There she is. Now consider that. And when you see that in your mind, which is the reaction, this is you feeling it. This is her feeling it back and putting it into your mind. So now feel her, which is you, experiencing this together. Make it real. The way you make it real is you observe it. So now look at it through your mind. Look at that feeling in your heart and go, wow, I really do feel kind of, right? And you become her. She becomes a real thing, which is your form. Your form in the real world, not the illusion of the physical and not the illusion of the divine, but in the real world, that is an actual form. And what it winds up becoming in the act of bestowal and this desire is the flip after the way back up turns it into pure reception. And you go from this constant want to have, bang, it's an explosion of reality. It's pure ecstasy. There's nothing like food when you're hungry. What is Lilith? She is your shadow, screaming out all the time to be heard. I want you, want me. I want you, want me. She is your want. Anytime you've ever wanted, that was her talking through you. So that's who Lilith is. And how do we talk to her? In the same way I've always said. We use the same technique as the goetic, but from the lens of truth. The Goetia is a toy. It's Candyland. It shoots and ladders. Lilith is you. Okay. So you get the gist here. And you know, the proof of that is really just in a matter of your being in a state of listening. As much as you can, you want to keep yourself in a state of listening, so that when the voice appears, you don't miss it. And when does it appear? Always. It's always talking. It's never not. So we don't have to wait to hear it. We have to just wake up to listening. And what is the idea of listening? Remembering. When you're in a state of listening, your higher self is in a state of speaking, always. Which means, when you're in a state of listening, you're the one talking. The answer is coming from your own voice to yourself. So, at the end of the day, you know, accessing that part, accessing that personality is that easy. It's a matter of allowing for it through that process. And that process is one that we have access to at all times. Does it help experiencing it through a ritual process or through like a dramatic reenactment? Of course. And, you know, it can be very powerful in that respect. Look at group workings in religion and in magical working. It's something powerful. If you allow yourself to have it, the act of communion is really a beautiful thing. And if you look at the Mass and some of the other interpretations of that, it can really be a very transcendent experience if you put yourself in the right place, which is in a state of listening while speaking and recognizing that you're both. And when that happens, you can manifest her, you can manifest many different entities, many different versions of yourself that are very real, that have a real form if you are strong enough to be weak and just close your eyes and jump. So, be her. You are her. Don't deny it. Give in to the shadow. Let it into yourself. Because when you do, the fear disappears. you get to see the world through the lens of the shadow. It's no longer something you have to peer through. It's something that you peer with. And when you do that, we're forced to use something other than our eyes, and therefore we see nothing but the truth. So I'm just going to leave that there. And there's a few things I wanted to do tonight. One of them is to take a look at a couple of decks, and let's see if they pass the test. Right? Do they pass the test? I don't know. Let's stay in the outer order for this one. Let's stay in the outer order. And so, obviously these do, right? This is the Qliphoth, which is the most perfect example of this story being told in pictorial form, period, bar none. And then we have the Hermetic Tarot, which is a beautiful opposite that I use for my work with the story, right? The March of the Courts, the Rise of the Proletary, the Inner Sanctum, the Spread. I use these two decks along with the third. Well, anyways. But so what we're going to be looking at tonight, though, are Golden Dawn inspired. But they both come from a very different place visually. And so I thought it'd be interesting to kind of compare them and see which one tells the story more obviously and which one tells the story more not so obviously. And it's a fun exercise to consider the different versions, because they are, spoiler, they're both telling the story, but the question is how do they approach it and which one kind of rings maybe more true to you, right? And so the first couple that we're going to look at, I've had these cards out on my desk here for a while. Okay, now, I usually have a Tree of Life up as an example, or I have the unicursal hexagram, like Crowley's unicursal hexagram, right, or a version of the Tree of Life. These are from the same deck, which is the Robert Wang Golden Dawn Tarot. This is the card back. And the card that I usually have out is just an extra card that it comes with, which is a very nice, sort of iconic version of the Tree of Life. And there's that Malkuth on the bottom, which is really the Qliphoth as well. This is two worlds split. I already talked about that. But you'll get the idea. Now, in this circumstance, though, he has some very interesting cards, and we're going to take a look at that particular deck and see how obvious is the story from his perspective and what he chose to put out as a very prominent member of the Golden Dawn. Okay, so we'll take a look at that deck. And we're also going to take a look at this deck, which is the Golden Dawn Ritual Tarot from Schick and Tabitha Cicero, who are, let's just say that they're a valuable source. They're a source to be trusted. They come from a lineage of knowledge directly down from Israel Regardie. And Israel Regardie comes directly from Crowley. So you can trust the images, is what I'm saying. And so we're going to take a look at that deck as well and see, is that a little more obvious of a story, or would you say that Robert Wang is maybe better? And so we'll take a look at both, right? And I just chose here the Temperance and the Star as the example from these two decks, and sort of looking at that dichotomy of spilling out the cups and kind of pouring them into each other, right? And the sort of the difference in these cards, but the similarity. So the first one that we're going to look at here is the Robert Wang. It's a Golden Dawn Tarot. And now there's a lot of question here that I've always had with respect to, for instance, how much of it can you trust? Because we know that there were several individuals, Crowley was certainly one of them, and some others that were very aware of the fact that there were intentional blinds thrown into the information whenever it was spoken about or written down or publicly displayed in some fashion. We've really come a long way since then, but so it's interesting that you'll see some differences between the elemental correspondences of the suits, for instance, or different depictions than you might think. And you have to ask yourself which one of those is an intentional blind and which one of those is strictly a difference in perspective, right? And so you have to kind of go through that exercise on your own so that you can personally come to the conclusion of, is this a lie, or is it misleading, or is it perspective? Okay, and so, you have to consider that whenever you're looking at anything that's derived from an active member of an organization that focuses on secret. And there's two kinds of secret, remember. There's the one that's intentional, and there's the one that just refers to that you need to kind of maybe look a little differently. That the truth is there if you have the eyes to see, right? And so let's take a look at some of these cards here and see if they help us to see the story. All right, we have some of the court cards. The idea of water. She's seated and she's standing on it. Interestingly, all the suits seem to have the idea that they're not physically manifest, right? Like this is coming from the cloud. There's the moon. The 4 yuds coming down are an interesting choice of the number. If you look at a lot of other decks, it's more than 4 typically. Very distinct red and blue towers on the dark path, right? To the place where the hermit lives. You consider the tree when we're looking at these as well. Should probably leave that out here as reference. There's the lovers. Interesting. Very mythological, isn't it? That just sort of has that idea of, that beautiful scene that we've seen in so many different ways. So many different stories have played that scene. Now that's something interesting, huh? It's the rainbow wand. I mean, it shows the number 10. It shows the number 3. It shows the number 4, 14, 5. It has the idea of a peace sign. There's 22 yuds, which makes sense, so forth. I mean, obviously it's going to have all that stuff there. But this one, there's a lot of hidden symbolism that really, this is not an easy, I don't think this is an easy deck to look at, and say, okay, well, I get it, right? This takes a little bit of understanding first. Like, why is that cup green? What's the purpose of the green cup? Or why is that wand red? And so forth. I mean, we kind of know that. I like the fact that the sword is pointing down. I like the cup is up. I like the yellow for the idea of, divine mind, right? The idea of the element of air. And divine mind. Intelligence. I like this too, of every 2 having a third. You have black and white and color, and then here you have sort of like all the different possibilities of that. The Chariot. Interesting that it's kicking up yellow dust in amongst blue. The blue being the water of the cup, and then the intelligence is the, you know, the mind is the thing being kicked up by the motion of the chariot. That's just great. King of Wand, interesting. So it seems like the story's here, but you have to kind of fish for it. Oftentimes with decks like this as well, when it's some type of magical system that you're not an initiate of, look at the majors, right? And then that's a good place to start, and then you can begin to explore. Where have I seen that before? I've seen those feet somewhere, right? Where did I see those? Let's take a look at Lilith again. Where was that picture that I had of Lilith? See those feet? This picture is really old. Now let's take a look at this here. So, I mean, it's an obvious correlation, right? That's not a stretch too much to see that, right? This idea. And don't forget, like, she ruled the birds, right? That's why you see with the air, she spoke the ineffable name of God, and when she did that, she flew into the air, right? That's the story. Let's jump back to the outer order. Dim sum feet. Like the rose. I was a fan of that rose. Here's the 10. It's an interesting arrangement with the 9 squares and then the one on top being poured into them. See that? The top cup being poured into them. And it's being fed from elsewhere. Like the actual source of the water is that cup at the top. Everybody see that? It's as if the hand on top, which it looks like is the one pouring the water, isn't really. It's the one that's allowing it to be poured by that one all the way on the top, that little orange one. That's really starting this whole chain. The Empress. Yep. Come on, that's just great. Imagine that overlaid on a Tree of Life, and now we're talking about some middle pillar stuff, right? Ace of Cup. Seen that somewhere. You know, it's in the story with respect to the idea of the lament, the cup of lament. You are all, yeah. To be all, you must remember that you are all. Absolutely. That's good stuff right there. Okay. It's this idea of wanting to give but not. But here, we see that it's overflowing from above. This is the idea of the reception. This is the idea of rejection. And this is the idea of bestowal. All right, now to see those larger, let's just jump to the bigger version of that. All right, this is the cup of reception. Receiving from the inside and then pouring out. All right, so this kind of has the idea of it jetting out, but it's really coming in and then, you know. But now maybe let's look at the cup of bestowal. This is the empty cup, the cup of rejection. This is the cup of lament, wanting to bestow but not able to. It's just full and bursting to give. And the cup of bestowal in the act of giving. Right, and we see that here in the original story. It's here washing our mind with divine love, right? We hear love in our mind. We take in divine mind in our heart. So that's the idea of the cup of bestowal as an upside down cup. But so now, this is one of those. Is it in the act of receiving? Is it in the act of attempting to give and then being blocked? Right? Is it crying? Are those tears? Maybe. You get the idea. Almost looks like the Hierophant, but different. Wow. Now he kept it at 8. He kept that lie going, right? Crowley fixed that. Which you'll see right here. This is Crowley's strength card. And he has it at number 11 by correcting the position of Leo. And we have Justice swapping to number 8. You'll notice in the Wang deck that the Justice is in number 11. And Justice clearly being Libra. Right? But yeah, I mean, it's there, but it's very hidden. And again, you kind of really, to get the gist of what's happening in a lot of the symbolism, need to be a member so that you're told the stuff that we don't get. But there are very good resources in books and other resources online that can go through this information if you'd like to seek it. It's certainly there for you. And I love the card back. Just beautiful. It's a different interpretation, right, of the one we're familiar with, maybe with the Thoth version, right, of the traditional rose cross. A simplified version of the rose cross. So that's the Golden Dawn Tarot by Robert Wang. Now let's take a look at the Golden Dawn Ritual Tarot by Schick and Tabitha Cicero, which is a group of individuals that are sharing a knowledge coming directly, second generation, basically, from Crowley himself. And again, are a source that can be trusted with respect to the integrity of the information. Okay, now this deck was designed by them for public consumption. However, it's obviously designed also in mind for those who are members, which I, full disclosure, am not a member of the Golden Dawn. Have never been affiliated with the Golden Dawn directly. This deck was designed for public consumption, so just keep that in mind when we look at it, right? And the goal is to again, does the deck pass the test? Does it tell the story, right? Or does it tell the actual one truth, or is it an art piece? Does it point at the truth, or does it point away from it? That's what we're here to try to figure out, right? So let's see, we have Temperance, the Universe. Maybe I should put the Tree of Life out. As like a reference. Interesting, they're green, a green cup being poured into and it's creating a green liquid. This is 14 yuds, 5. Interesting. Yeah. And again, a lot of the symbolism is going to be sort of like secret Golden Dawn stuff that, unless you have looked it up or read into it, you may not understand, and that's okay. What we're looking for is, does it ring in our hearts? That's where we hear divine mind, in our hearts. It's not about looking at it with your brain and deciphering. It's about feeling it. Like here we have Capricorn. We have Mars in Capricorn. Right. We also have the idea of it being like an earthy kind of vibe. There's the Empress. A lot of green. Look at her holding the Ankh. I love that. She typically represents Venus, which we can see there on the bottom, but she's holding an Ankh. And of course the symbol of Venus looks very much like the Ankh, doesn't it? And what is that referring to? It's referring to the idea of the communication going from the heart right back into the heart, bypassing the mind. No ego. Like, how do we communicate our hearts to the mind when there's something in the way? We don't. We just go around it. And so the Ankh is just the idea of that back and forth communication. Right? And so we see that represented here, both in the symbol of Venus and also the symbol of the Ankh that she's holding. Right? There's a shin on top, that Hebrew letter under the 3, along with the the bird that's descending. Clearly she's in a Vesica Pisces, right, which is a feminine shape. The green is interesting too. There's Capricorn and Jupiter. This is great. But you get the idea. Green hands. The background, which isn't showing up very nicely on camera, is actually a very deep, warm purple. That is, it's not really doing it justice to the color. It's a purple. It's almost equivalent to that purple in the 9. It's showing up better on this card. See that color purple on the 9? That's what this background is. And it's just not showing up due to the UV coating. You can kind of see it there, but yeah, it's actually purple. It's a little more obvious here. Oh, here's the Ace of Swords. Yeah, nice bright yellow. Almost looks angry. Doesn't it look like an angry emoji? Looks like Grumpy Cat. Here's the 10. Same idea. It's the flower feeding the cups. Right? Mars and Pisces. Now where's the Lilith? Is she here? There's that wand again. Pretty. It's furry. Of course, we know Lilith appears in many places, but let's just take a look at, like, for instance, the Strength card, right? The Strength card in the Robert Wang deck was very strength. Let's see if they went the route of lust. There's Justice. The Law compared to the laws. And one side of the scale are the scales, and the other side of the scale is transformation. Love the Magician here. Look at him glowing yellow with infinity in his mind. There's that Ten of Pentacles. Let's see if we can find something that looks like it's telling the story of Lilith, who wants to bestow but is unable. As if the cups just keep going back and forth and are never introduced to the world. So let's see if we can find the Hermit, like a Strength card. An active Chariot, huh? Judgment. Everybody thought it'd follow the yellow brick road. Follow the yellow brick road? Well, of course, yes. I mean, what is yellow but divine mind? Gorgeous. The Tower. See the two trees? The destruction of everything in the middle, which is all the lies, the personality, the thing we think we are that we know we aren't. Numerologically, obviously, there's some significance here that the star is 7 plus 1 is 8. And that's finally, pouring out the cups, right? And behind her are the two trees. One foot on land, 1 foot in the water. Both in the water. Who's who? Same idea as the Robert Wang, frankly, is that unless you have an understanding of the system, these are kind of hard to decode, right? You need some kind of way to decode these to really get to the heart of the message. Now, thankfully, they wrote a book related to it, and it's not a little white book. It comes with the deck, and it's pretty good. And so they reveal as much as they can with respect to respecting their oath, but also putting out information that's good enough for the public to learn and to perhaps, discover the truth. So, but I don't know. I think so. They both require a little bit of understanding, but they do tell the story. That's my impression of those, and rightfully so, because they're designed for and by the Golden Dawn, with the intent that it's going to be seen publicly, and so there's a little bit there hidden. But I'm sure with the correct information, it becomes very clear very fast, right? And here we have the Thoth and then the Hermetic Tarot. Now, this was also put out by people who are members of a secret order that they hold their oath to. But at the same time, there's an understanding that there's a certain level of information that has been allowed to be spoken and taught. And so a lot of the secrets aren't secrets any longer. Most of the secrets now are just related to sort of the inner working stuff that really is irrelevant to coming to the one truth. If you're going to take the work seriously, then if it assists you in going to the one truth, then it's true, regardless of your affiliation with the organization that put the picture out. It's what the picture feels like that matters. Right. And so just remember the fact that what is Lilith but you? And you can become her. And if you do, all kinds of fun. It's like access to a whole new level of truth. We saw her in the I Ching. We saw her in Zohar. We saw her in the Gematria process, right? We saw her in the Bible. We saw her in Apocrypha. Where else did we see her? We saw her in Goethe, right? Faust. We saw her in the tarot. We saw her in the tree. I don't know if I cut off at that point or not, right? But I had a picture up that I put of that ultimately the upper version of Malkuth in the lower world where Lilith lives. She's really all of them and encapsulated as one that reflects as seven. And that one is called the Qliphoth. Okay, and so it's really just that one negative Sephiroth that's really pointing to the idea of everything that is on the bottom of this tree here, the tree we live in, that we think we live in that 10, the only thing that's actually physically manifest in the actual world. Is combined for that top crown to actually wind up being the unification of her and us, of Lilith and Adam combined. And when you consider that that's actually the goal of the work to begin with, is to go back up the tree, but we've come to the one truth and that conclusion that there is only one tree, that there is no up or down, that we never actually left. It changes the whole kind of dynamic of this whole relationship of what we're trying to do here. Because what we're trying to do is really just to strictly remember and to combine these two together and to recognize that that conversation is in fact always happening. And now that's just another way to put the same story in respect to Kabbalah. So we see it now as well in the Kabbalah. Every two has a third, right? And so that's a lot of evidence. And now one thing I thought would be interesting too is to do the Gematria on Adam and Lilith, compared to Adam and Eve, if we combine those two names together, right? Just as a playful thing. And if anybody else has any ideas on some Gematria that we can throw together to kind of see where else she appears, that might be an interesting exercise too. Because what is her value again? Let's put that calculator back. Right? She means 480, and also reflects as 12, and she also reflects as 3. The High Priestess. And now when we do the Temurah on Anusa, we get 9, which is justice. So the opposite of Lilith is justice, which is the High Priestess. The moon, the divine feminine, becoming the idea of balance, right? But so I just thought it would be interesting for us to do the Gematria on Adam and Lilith. And so Adam, is clearly a easy name to spell. We have the number 46, right? So let's just mark that down as Adam 46. Okay, let's see here. Give me just a moment to pop that up. Okay, there we go. Perfect. Okay, so then let's take a look at Adam, first of all, is 46. And how did we get 46 from Aleph? Dalet. Aleph. Mem. Right? And that's 46. Now 46 also equals 10, which equals 1, right? And so what we're talking about here is this is the number for Adam would be 46. Now let's take a look then at Lilith. Thank you, Shinam. I appreciate that. And then we'll look at Eve. Let's just look at Eve first. And Eve is going to be Hey, Vow, Hey. Okay. Okay, so the E is pronounced, the vowel is from the letter Hey. And so it's actually pronounced Heva, not Eve, but Heva. And that would be Hey, Vow, Hey, which is 5 plus 6, which is 11, plus 5 is 16. Right? And now 16 equals 7. Right? everybody see that? And so Eve is 16. Let me make some room here. Okay. And we know Lilith. We've already done the math on Lilith. Let me get rid of it. There we go. There we go. Okay. It looks like I cut that off. Let's fix that. Okay, so this is the Gematria for Adam, Eve, and Lilith. Okay, so Adam is 46, Eve is 16. And Lilith is 480. Okay. So now let's just consider what we're looking at here, just to clarify. What we're talking about is the idea of pardon me when I get this guy. The idea of how are these words going to coincide compared to each other? And let's just look at the words and just, you know, have that playful kind of conversation here, right? Like, what are we looking at here? If we consider them kind of in and amongst themselves and then together. So first, let's just look at Adam. Okay. Okay. I'm gonna just put that there actually, because I may want to have the desk here as well. That'll do, right? You guys are okay with that? It doesn't have to be all centered. Okay, good, great. So what we're looking at here is Adam, which would be 46. Let's look at that first. A name of God, a female slave. The angel of the seven of sword, a ruiner. Anyway, Adam. A dividing, a separation. Interesting. And then that means 10 and 1, which we'll get there in a sec. So now let's look at Eve, 16. He seized, cleaved to. He seized, like attached himself to. She means she, S-H-E, like a woman. Alas, woe, like or equal to. Interesting, like or equal to. And that's for Eve. Hepa. Injury, war, lust, fell. Fell. Okay, so now let's take a look at Lilith, right? 480. And what's more significant is when we add them together in a moment, right? But so let's take a look at 480. Malkut, the 42-fold name of Yetzirah, and also Qliphoth, right? Like we're talking about the idea of the husk rather than the radiating light, but the light that's trying to radiate but being blocked by the shell of the other world, right? So now let's add them together. So first of all, let's add together Adam and Eve. Right, so Adam and Eve, we're going to add together 46 and 16, right? So that's 50, that's 62. So 62 is a new number derived from taking Adam, which is 46, and adding the 16, right? And so we're going to go 46, 16, 62. And this is the combination of Adam and Eve. There we go. Healing. The sons. You know, Cain and Abel. To commit healing. let's take a look at Adam and Lilith and see if there's a difference here. So this is 62 is Adam and Eve, Adam and Lilith, right? So we have 480 and 46. We have 526, which is a 13, right? That's a 4. But let's just go to 526 first. Superliminary. I'm just, sorry, I had something in my way here. This is 526. Superliminary. Everybody see that? What's up, Mama? Thank you for popping in. So Adam and Eve is a very different definition than Adam and Lilith, right? Adam and Lilith, we have a totally different definition in 526. Now, let's take a look at Lilith and Eve. The unification of these two kind of competing feminine energies, right? The created and the transformed. So let's take a look at Eve at 16 and Lilith at 480, and so that's 496. Okay, I'll just put it up here just to make it clear on the screen here. We're doing 16 for Eve. Plus 480 for Lilith. And so 496, which we know, again, we can cancel the 9 here, so it's 10. But we'll do it short end of the long way. 9 and 4 is 13, plus 6 is 19, 1 plus 9 is 10, which is a 1. Right, so it's, but the gist here is 496 is the combination of Eve and Lilith. Okay, it's glad to see you too. I'm really, really glad you popped in. 496. Leviathan. Interesting. So Eve and Lilith together are Leviathan. Eve and Lilith together are Malkut. A small bundle. The sum of all numbers between 1 and 31. You see the beauty of this idea? Lilith is not only an important part of the story, right? She's like the enabler of the whole story to happen. She's the serpent that enabled the whole thing. She's the other side of Eve. She's the other side of us. She is the object of Adam's true desire. And she has always been. She was created at the same moment that Adam was. It's quite a beautiful story, isn't it? Because it's your story. And how do you know what I just said is true? Because you lived it. Feel it in your heart. You are Lilith. Yes. Yep, that's who she was. Yeah, it's funny. The stream went down and I restarted it, right? So part 1 is that. And part 2 is proving that it's you and how to become her. Right, and so we went there, and then we decided to kind of play with some toys and do the math. So we took Adam and Eve, Adam and Lilith, looked at that, and then we took Eve and Lilith and looked at that. And so now we got to do it, right? We got to do it. We got to combine all 3, because that's what we're actually talking about here, right? So let's take the number for Adam, Eve, and Lilith, and stick them together, and have one word, and we'll see what that word is. Let's take a look at what that word is. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at 46, 16, 480, gives us 542, okay? And now let's take a look at, first of all, that's a 2, right? That's great. 4 and 5 is 9, so we can just cancel that. That becomes a 0. Or 4 plus 5 is 9, plus 2 is 11. 1 plus 1 is 2. So it's an 11 which is a 2. Right. But let's look at the the 542. Blank. There is no entry in 777 for that number. Now that's interesting. Again, there's a resource that I have found online which gives us more information related to this. Let me pull it up for you guys so I can share this resource. I'm very cautious when approaching specific sources online related to Gematria, related to these, because I don't know their idea about transliteration, their ideas about the vocabulary, the ideas about final letters. There's things that matter. So I found a resource that can be trusted. Okay, and so I'm gonna use it and then share it. So first, let me pop that up. That might appear here. Give me just a moment to make this happen. We're going to basically want it from that point, right? Okay, yeah, so let's just squeeze that down, make that a bit bigger. Okay, good. So what we're going to do here, what my attempt is to show this website on the stream so you can see it, and then I'll put the link in the chat in a moment here, okay? So let's get rid of that. Okay, great. So now what we're going to essentially do here is... first thing I'm going to do is fix that. Okay. There we go. Okay, so then we're looking for the number 542. Okay. 542. Let's put this on top. There you go. And so what this website shows is we can just jump to the number 542. Let's just find it. It's small print and I'm old, so I can't see any longer. Okay. And so now let's just line this up so it can be seen. Sorry that you guys have to go through me figuring this out on the fly. Not getting this window to match. There we go. Okay. So this is what we're talking about. It has a nice list of words related to the number. It also gives you the quick Gematria right there, right? 542, 11, 2. How great is that? Good website. And again, I feel good about the information. And I'm kind of I'm pretty strict about that kind of stuff, so. There we go. Let's just take up this whole space. There we go, okay. All right, so now what we're trying to do here is look at 542, which is the combination of all three names. This is the idea of Adam, Eve, and Lilith put together. The place whence a child breaks forth. That's a great one. Waves? Where have I talked about waves before? The idea of the vortex, right? Many, many times we've talked about this idea of the divine vortex, which is kind of great, and the idea of the two trees and so forth. So the Gematria, when we're talking about Adam, Eve, and Lilith put together, gives us 542, which is just great, which is also 2, or 11. And so in both cases, that's just great. But now we needed to investigate a little further because 542 did not appear as an entry in 777. And then gleanings. I love that. So, it's fun, right? Playing with toys is fun. Especially when those toys are actually instructions for building a sign that points to the truth. What time we got here? 4:24. Okay, it's getting a little late, but what I would like to do is to maybe throw some cards real quick before we call it an evening. What did we go through tonight? We went through a couple of decks, looking at it to tell the story, right? We went through Lilith, my interpretation, as well as some specific perspectives related to Golden Dawn, the I Ching, Zohar. What else did we look at? The Bible, the Apocrypha. Right? We looked at my system. Right? Obviously, I have to plug my system. Right? So we looked at that and how that connects there. We looked at a lot of different ways to tell the same story, which is that you are her. That's basically it. That's what I was trying to get to the heart of this evening by telling that same story multiple ways. Is the truth, and the truth is that you are Lilith, and you can become her anytime you want. And when you do, watch out, you're gonna have a blast. All right. Okay, so let's just put this aside. Let's just kind of separate these a little bit. Shuffle this up. Okay. Sorry again that the stream dropped again and we had any issues. I had some technical issues tonight initially with my microphone not working, and then next thing you know, the stream dropped a couple times. Oop, that one's sticking out. Okay, we're going to keep that out. So it's been an interesting evening technically, and I really appreciate everybody that's kind of followed me through this or goes back and watches the streams. If you didn't see the first part, you gotta. It's powerful. It's awesome. There's some good practical stuff, but there's also some good ideas that kind of set the tone for what we talked about here, which is to how to activate her, how to know her, how to literally become Lilith, and to understand that power and what that means. And we're going to continue on that conversation moving forward with respect to how to activate and to create the space in which we place entities and what we do with them once we release them onto the world, right? Or to embody us. And when that spirit is her, who is you, but when that spirit is her, it's something else. You have to be open to the process, but it's special. So, that said, just really quickly, I'm going to do a general thing here. I just pull one card. My coffee machine is calling me, and so I'm going to step away for a moment. But before I do that, I'm going to flip this card. And then these two are going to be related to that sentence here. It's going to kind of create a word. And then we're going to see what that word is trying to say. So let's take a look. I'm going to just flip this to start. And then we're going to go from there. The Four of Wand. The Four of Wand, okay? So think about what the Four of Wand means right now with respect to this story. with respect to what we're actually talking about here. Right? And we'll go from there. Okay. See you guys in a minute. Alrighty, let's do this. So, we have this one card here, the Four of Wand, which we know also is Venus in Aries. How great is that, right? We were just talking about Venus with respect to that symbol of the Ankh, and the idea of that sort of divine feminine, and then this idea of the green being that unification of the yellow and blue, right? That's what we're talking about here. Oh, great. Love that. So, 20, the Aeon, okay? And there's a thing that we talked about, too, that I kind of just sort of dropped in the beginning here, which I'll read at the same time as we look at the desk. Where she's speaking about that she's going to have control over the men and women for a specific period of time after their birth. Right? How the women she will control for 20 days, and for men 8 days. Okay? And so it says, "See, the Holy One said to Adam, if she agrees to come back, what I made was good, and if not, she must be permitted 100 of her children to die each day," right? And then it goes into, "We will drown them in the sea, in the water." I talked about that in the beginning, and what that really means. And then she says, "Leave me. I was created only to cause sickness to infants, and if the infant is male, will have dominion over him for 8 days after his birth. And if it is female, for 20 days. And now 8 days from 30 is 22. And 20 days from 30 is 10. So what we're talking about here are the 22 cards of the planets and signs, right, which we've seen many times in the wheel. The planets and signs, right? And then what we're seeing is also the deacons, the 10-degree periods of time. And that combination of these that are counter-rotating up and down from the higher and the lower world. The lower world, which is the dominion of Lilith, and the higher world, which is the dominion of Adam. Another way to look at that is the idea that the lower world is the dominion of Lilith, and the upper world is the dominion of Eve, Heva. And the two of those together are the divine feminine. And their desire to both receive and bestow upon Adam as a union, those three, creates that number that we talked about here, right? That number, that 542, of the three of them combined. The 480 of Lilith, the 16 of Eve, and the 46 of Adam, creating that 542, right? The mouth of the womb, the place whence a child breaks forth. What is that child? That child is you. That was you who chose to do this to begin with. It was you who chose to enter Eden as two separate beings, being Lilith and Adam. It says it right here. Genesis 1, verse 27. In Genesis 1:27, it very specifically states the creation of Adam and Lilith together. Before Eve was it was in the picture. Eve didn't come until much, much later, right? So let's look into Genesis 1. It's hard to get to the first couple pages, right? Especially in Bible paper. Verse 27. So God created man in his own image, and in the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. Who is them? Adam and Lilith. Later on, a whole chapter later, in chapter 2, verse 22, 222, about 3-4 pages later, Eve shows up. Then the rib which the Lord God had taken from man, he made into a woman, and he brought her to man. And Adam said, This is now bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh, shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. And so the idea here is that Eve didn't show up until much later. The original creation was Adam and Lilith at the same time. They were equal. And when the descent happened, the tree split into two trees down here. And so the tree that we're familiar with, the one that we're always talking about kind of openly now, frankly, is this original tree, was the unified one that split into the one that we think we see and the one that we all ignore, this dark tree, the tree of death. But what we're actually talking about is the opportunity to unify them by having this conversation with that side of us, with Lilith, the divine feminine that's waiting always, constantly to be heard, that all she wants to do is to give and can't, because her Sphirot is a Qliphoth, and what that means is it's a shell. So what do? Well, we go through the invocation, evocation work, and we understand what we're trying to do here in that communication is to become her, because we are her. She is you. You are her, and you can become that. Know it in your heart first, see it with your mind, and become her. Be it. Now, the idea of that and the application of it are different things. But we spoke about how to do that in the beginning of the stream here, and I recommend that you take a look at that again, because you can apply that to more than just Lilith. But it's such a core of who we are that it's easier to access than some of these more complex entropy-based entities that require goetic work and some other mathematics to really understand. Lilith, you don't need anything to understand. She is you. If you've ever looked at anything with want, that was her. And that's you. Okay? Right. And, again, in the beginning of the stream, I spoke about exactly that. The restoration, the reunion, the connection, the recollection. And what that really means with respect to Lilith and who she really is. Because she is dark. But she's dark in the sense of that is the thing that draws in the light. That's the thing that contains it. She is the cup to our sword. She is you. So that's what I have to say about that. And I think that there's something there to explore, and those who want to continue to explore that with me, feel free to join the Inner Order. And in that order, we have conversations that are a little more, not really suitable necessarily for a live stream. And we're going to be planning one here soon. There's a few people that asked about it. I'm going to be reaching out to each individual, and we'll have a date set when I get a couple of people that can commit to a time. And we can wind up doing probably a weekly or a couple of time a week conversation as a group, okay? Otherwise, that said, we covered a couple of things that are tonight. But they all center around that same story of who are we and how do we access that? How do we become it? Because that's what we're here to do. To turn our being into a becoming. And in doing so, to have that conversation. And when that conversation happens, we are back to the being, okay? So thank you so much for joining. And we'll see you guys soon. None of this